I knew as soon as we were there, I was taking the life of my child. And yet I felt unable to do anything, unable to say, stop, unable to overcome my own fears of having someone find out that I'd made this decision. And so I'm following through with this process, and from the moment it began, the regret was there. The self-hatred, the knowledge that I'm choosing to take life from the single place that God has granted us for life to come forth. You, in my opinion, couldn't get more offensive than that. And I knew that right there in that moment and felt unable to do anything other than let it happen. The idea of wanting to stay pure until marriage was in my heart, but it didn't have a basis because I didn't have that spiritual background that told me why would that be important. And I knew that I had already compromised what I had said was going to be a lifetime belief for me. Once you have made that compromise, you can't take that back and say it didn't happen. Physically, emotionally, anything. I remember going home at Christmas time, and I was a very well-behaved kid for my parents. So I was that one that they could count on to do the right thing. So here I was with this dreaded secret. I was already engaged in a relationship I knew I shouldn't have been engaged in. And anytime as a child, if my mom would try to approach that conversation with me, I would just tell her, I want to stay pure till marriage. It's going to be fine, Mom. So I felt like I had no one that I could tell. There was no one I could safely say, I've ruined everything. I've leapt into something I swore I never would. And so I kept it a secret with my boyfriend. I started school in August, and by January, I was pregnant. And I remember thinking, there's not anyone I can tell. There's no one I can trust to say, I need help. I need out of this, because what I had given him was all of me. And so my investment was in him. He said, my sister has had an abortion and we're just going to call the place where she went. And he was very set in his mind, I'm not doing this. We're not going to be parents. And when I understood he was not going to be willing to bend, then I just kind of went along with that mindset and just kind of shut down. And I remember just being almost numb, like not being able to process anything emotionally, because if I had, I would have had to face it. But I remember the steps to the clinic. It was an old medical building. And I just remember feeling like every step I took was a step that was changing my life forever. And I felt compelled that I could not stop taking those steps. I had to go through with it. And I remember walking into the clinic, and the first thing they asked for was payment. And it was the cost of $250. And I remember thinking, can there be a cost for the life of your child? And what can you buy for $250? You know, you think there's a lot more things you have to make a bigger investment in to own. None as valuable as a human life. And yet, you could say goodbye to that human life for the cost of $250. Do you only have math homework, or do you have more?
Just math homework. Oh, my spelling packet.
When you have an abortion, there's so many layers to that sin, and there's so many consequences that come with it. I was so depressed and so ready not to live. I had started contemplating suicide because the weight of what was done was all inside of my heart. And even though I had accepted Jesus as my Savior, I really hit bottom and just made decisions and choices that were really what we would call self-destructive. So I tuned into Christian radio, and there I found this wonderful broadcast, Focus on the Family, that truly ministered to me in so many ways. It was like the voice of hope speaking to me. And in particular, hearing broadcasts of women sharing about their abortions and being able to identify that I wasn't alone. Even though we know millions of abortions happen, we don't really understand how those women feel often because it's such a private issue. So for them to come on this radio and bravely tell their story and be able to say, I walked through self-destruction and all these things that I had walked through, I was understanding for the first time, it wasn't just me, it was the abortion and the consequences that come with that. And I remember them saying that the average healing time for a woman is 10 years. And I was already at the 12 or 13 year mark from my abortion. And I remember feeling hope that the average is 10 years, so that means somebody's longer. So if somebody's longer, I'm not lost. And I was finding myself becoming equipped to be able to face those situations. And the pain that I faced and the way that I faced it was also very common. And just knowing that someone else was out there who'd been in my shoes was a healing point for me. Just knowing that. And knowing I could confess that, and knowing that he fully forgave me, that his dying on the cross and his resurrecting was my freedom. I want others to know that there's healing, and I want others to not be afraid to talk about abortion. If we never talk about it, we'll never have victory over it. And I want healing for every woman because I know the pain that they've walked through.